I never thought my own sister would try to ruin the happiest day of my life, but looking back, it was the final straw in a lifetime of favoritism and sabotage that had been building, like a storm cloud over years of quiet resentment and unspoken pain. And now, at 32, as Emily, a successful fashion designer, as I bring to life ethereal wedding gowns and evening dresses that flow like dreams made tangible, negotiating fiercely with international suppliers over rolls of luxurious Italian silk that catch the light in iridescent waves, or delicate French lace that feels like whispers against the skin. I can reflect on how far I've come from that overshadowed childhood. Yet the scars remain etched deep. For growing up, I was always the invisible one, the perpetual underdog who had to fight tooth and nail for even the smallest crumb of recognition or affection in a family dynamic that seemed engineered to elevate my older sister Laura at my expense, while she glided through life effortlessly on a perpetual wave of parental indulgence and excuses that shielded her from any real consequences. Our parents, Mom with her perpetual worried frown, and Dad with his exhausted sighs after long shifts, treating Laura like some delicate porcelain doll that might shatter at the slightest breeze, always ready to forgive her laziness, her entitlement, her half-hearted attempts at anything, while I, the younger one, received nothing but hand-me-down clothes that never quite fit right, lectures about responsibility and pulling my weight even when I was just a child, and a constant sense that I was somehow less deserving, less worthy of their pride or investment. And little did I know back then just how deep that favoritism truly ran, extending even to financial betrayal when they diverted a $25,000 inheritance specifically bequeathed to me by my beloved grandma, to instead fund Laura's endless string of fresh starts and whims that never amounted to anything substantial. But the pinnacle of it all came on the night of my lavish wedding, a $80,000 affair that my husband Alex and I had saved for meticulously over years, when Laura, in a moment of pure malice disguised as sibling playfulness, slipped something sinister into my champagne flute during the cocktail hour, the bubbles rising unnaturally fast with a faint, bitter undertone that cut sharply through the overwhelming floral perfume of the venue's blooming gardenias and peonies, an act intended to humiliate me spectacularly in front of 300 distinguished guests, including industry colleagues, close friends, and extended family, perhaps forcing me to flee to the bathroom in distress during the reception or speeches, stealing the spotlight on what was supposed to be my triumphant day. But instead, that malicious prank became the unwitting catalyst for my long-overdue revenge, as I cleverly allowed her to proceed with her planned toast, handing her the very glass she'd tampered with through a subtle switch when she wasn't looking, her voice oozing smug satisfaction and false sweetness as she stood there in the spotlight, only for her carefully laid plan to backfire dramatically, watching her world unravel in real time as the effects hit her instead, her face contorting in discomfort and then outright panic, while the truth about years of family deception came pouring out like red wine staining pristine white lace on a bridal gown. And to truly understand how we arrived at that explosive moment, I have to take you all the way back to the beginning, because this story isn't just about one vindictive act at a wedding reception. It's the culmination of decades of accumulated hurt, imbalance, and betrayal that shaped me into the resilient woman I am today. Starting from when I was the younger sister by 3 years, born into a struggling middle-class family in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Ohio, where money was always tight, bills piled up on the kitchen counter like unspoken accusations, and affection was rationed out unevenly, with Laura perpetually receiving the lion's share, the softest parts of the loaf while I scraped by on the crusts. Our home, a modest 2-story house with peeling blue shutters that creaked in the wind, a small backyard overrun with dandelions, and a kitchen that perpetually carried the heavy, comforting yet monotonous scent of Mom's signature overcooked casserole, layers of ground beef mixed with canned green beans and cream of mushroom soup, baked until everything melded into a soggy, mushy comfort food that we ate night after night because it was cheap and filling. And from my earliest memories, as young as 4 or 5, my innate talents and passions were systematically overlooked or dismissed in favor of propping up Laura's fragile ego. I was the child who would retreat to my tiny bedroom with its faded floral wallpaper, surrounding myself with scavenged scraps of fabric from garage sales or thrift stores, old curtains or discarded clothing that I would painstakingly cut and stitch into miniature outfits for my dolls, using a blunt needle and thread that often pricked my small fingers, drawing tiny beads of blood that dotted the material like accidental embroidery, excitedly running downstairs to show Mom my latest creation. A lopsided dress with puckered seams but brimming with childish creativity and promise, holding it up proudly and saying, "Look, Mom, I made a dress all by myself," only for her to barely glance up from where she sat at the dining table hovering over Laura's homework, helping her with problems that Laura had no interest in solving herself, responding distractedly with, "That's nice, Emily dear, but come help your sister with her math here, she's the smart one in the family." You know, as if my efforts were merely cute distractions unworthy of real praise or encouragement. And Dad was equally complicit in this dynamic. Coming home exhausted from his long hours at the local factory, his work boots thudding heavily on the linoleum floor, hands stained with engine grease that no amount of scrubbing fully removed, he'd bypassed my carefully placed sketchbook on the coffee table lids, pages crammed with childish drawings of elaborate ball gowns with flowing trains and intricate beadwork inspired by fairy tale book sandhead straight to ruffle Laura's golden curls, asking her about her day with genuine interest while I sat quietly hoping for a similar acknowledgement that rarely came. And this favoritism manifested in every aspect of our lives, perhaps most painfully in the disparities around birthdays and holidays. For my 10th birthday, I remember unwrapping Laura's old bicycle that had been hastily repainted pink, but with a rusty chain that squeaked annoyingly and pedals that stuck, the paint chipping off in flakes the very first time I rode it through rain puddles in the street, splashing mud up my legs, while Laura's birthdays were extravagant affairs, with invitations sent to the entire class, store-bought cakes from the fancy bakery downtown, towering with elaborate fondant roses and layers of rich vanilla sponge that perfumed the whole house with sugary sweetness. Presents piled high in shiny wrapping paper revealing brand new dolls with real hair, the latest bicycles with streamers on the handlebars, and once even a pony ride at a local farm where the scent of hay and animal fur clung to us as she giggled delightedly atop the plodding mare while I held the reins from below. And Christmases were no different. One year standing out vividly in my mind when I carefully unwrapped a second-hand art supply kit with crayons already worn down to stubs and colored pencils snapped in half, some half-melted from being left in a hot car perhaps, while Laura excitedly tore into a professional easel, complete with a set of vibrant oil paints in tubes that gleamed like precious jewels under the twinkling lights of our artificial tree. Mom beaming at her and saying softly, "Santa knows you've been such a good girl this year," as I forced a tight smile to hide the twisting knot of jealousy and hurt in my chest, like a thread pulled too tight, threatening to snap. And it went beyond mere material possessions, into the realm of emotional neglect and starvation that left deeper marks. For instance, when I was 12 and won first place in a school-wide art contest with a detailed charcoal drawing of an elegant, flowing gown, inspired by old Hollywood glamour, proudly displayed on the bulletin board in the hallway for weeks. My parents didn't even attend the award assembly, despite my pleading reminders, claiming work conflicts or tiredness. But when Laura managed a third-place ribbon in a regional spelling bee after notoriously misspelling necessary with only one C and one S, but still receiving a shiny participation trophy, they made a big fuss, taking her out for celebratory ice cream at the local parlor, where the cold strawberry scoops melted quickly down the waffle cone as she preened and recounted her triumph dramatically. And as we entered our teenage years, the chasm between us only widened further, like a poorly sewn seam ripping apart under increasing strain from everyday wear. By high school, I was already independent out of necessity, taking on after-school jobs at the neighborhood supermarket, where the harsh fluorescent lights buzzed incessantly overhead, and the constant beep of the barcode scanner became a monotonous soundtrack to my shifts, bagging groceries with paper or plastic, smiling politely at customers while saving every dollar tipped or earned toward quality art supplies and eventually college applications, staying up late into the night under the warm glow of my bedside desk lamp sketching intricate designs of elegant silhouettes for prom dresses or cocktail attire, dreaming big about one day escaping to New York and launching my own fashion label where my creativity could flourish unbound. Whereas Laura simply coasted through everything with minimal effort, barely maintaining passing grades, dropping out of community college after just one semester because it wasn't her vibe, as she put it, moving right back into the family home where Mom and Dad enabled her fully, allowing her to lounge endlessly on the living room couch in sweatpants binge-watching daytime television or reality shows, while they continued paying her cell phone bill, car insurance, gas money, and whatever else she needed without question, defending her to me with phrases like she's just finding herself. Emily, you're the responsible one, so you understand, all while I commuted hours each way to a reputable design school on a hard-won partial scholarship, balancing intense coursework and pattern making in textiles with late-night waitressing shifts at a diner where the pervasive smell of greasy fries and burnt coffee clung stubbornly to my uniform and hair long after I got home, graduating at 22 with top honors and a portfolio overflowing with original pieces, like sustainable maxi dresses crafted from eco-friendly fabrics, each meticulous stitch representing my unyielding determination and grit in the face of adversity. Yet when I excitedly called home to share the news of landing my first paid internship at a prestigious boutique design firm in Manhattan, their response was disappointingly lukewarm. A brief "that's great, honey. We're proud," quickly followed by, "but don't forget to call your sister more often. She's been having another rough week and could use your support." As if my achievements were secondary to propping up Laura's perpetual crises. And those rough weeks for Laura seemed never-ending, a cycle of failed, multi-level marketing schemes, selling essential oils or leggings that promised quick riches but delivered only storage bins full of unsold inventory, gathering dust in the garage, toxic relationships with unreliable boyfriends who came and went, leaving emotional wreckage in their wake, and impulsive shopping sprees that maxed out credit cards on clothes or gadgets she barely used, always turning to our parents for bailouts that they provided without hesitation. Meanwhile, I continued hustling relentlessly in the city, advancing from unpaid intern fetching coffee and running errands to junior designer contributing actual ideas in meetings, saving scrupulously every extra penny toward my ultimate dream of opening a small independent studio where I could craft bespoke custom pieces for clients, transforming initial concept sketches into wearable art that made women feel empowered and beautiful. But the deepest wound that never fully healed until much later reopened sharply when our grandma passed away peacefully in her sleep, 5 years before my wedding. She had always been my true champion and confidant, the one adult in my life who genuinely saw and nurtured my potential without reservation, a spirited woman well into her 80s, with neatly pinned silver hair and a classic bun, sparkling eyes behind bifocals, and the infectious laugh that sounded like tinkling glass bells on a breezy day. Visiting her cozy bungalow always felt like stepping into a sanctuary, filled with the soothing aroma of lavender sachets tucked into drawers, and the warm, gooey scent of her homemade chocolate chip cookies fresh from the oven, the chips still melty as we'd share them on her front porch swing that creaked rhythmically back and forth while she listened intently to my stories about school projects or latest designs, often slipping a crisp $20 bill into my palm with a conspiratorial whisper, "This is for your dreams. Emmy, my dear, don't let anyone tell you you can't make them real." And she was acutely aware of the unfair favoritism in our family, occasionally pulling Mom aside for hushed but firm scoldings about treating us equally. So when she died, it was devastating, but her will provided a beacon of hope, explicitly leaving me $25,000 earmarked for Emily's further education or to support her business ventures in fashion design, as a way to level the playing field she knew I desperately needed. However, since our parents were named executors of the estate, they handled all the paperwork and distributions, and when I inquired politely about the bequest a few months later, they casually dismissed it, saying, "Oh, sweetie, after all the legal fees and taxes, it only came to about $5,000. We deposited it directly into your account for safekeeping." And sure enough, $5,000 appeared, but the amount felt suspiciously low, given Grandma's lifelong frugality and careful savings habits that I knew had amassed far more. Yet at the time I was overwhelmed with building my career in a competitive city, so I pushed the nagging doubt aside, like a loose thread I intended to fix later, letting it go but with the suspicion lingering persistently in the back of my mind, festering quietly until circumstances forced me to confront it. And fast-forwarding several years to the joyful chapter of my engagement and wedding planning, I met my wonderful husband Alex at a glamorous fashion week after party in a rooftop venue overlooking the glittering Manhattan skyline, the atmosphere electric with animated chatter from industry insiders, the constant clink of champagne flutes, and the heady mix of expensive perfumes mingling with ambition in the air. He, a talented software engineer with a calm, steady demeanor that perfectly balanced my creative intensity, kind hazel eyes, and a warm smile that could light up even the dimmest room, like successful code finally compiling without errors. After hours of debugging, we bonded instantly over shared laughs about the chaos of the event, and soon fell deeply in love, building a solid partnership based on mutual respect, encouragement, and shared goals. Saving diligently together for our dream wedding that totaled around $80,000 funded, almost entirely from our own hard-earned salaries with no parental contributions expected or requested. And I poured my heart into designing my own bridal gown, a breathtaking cascading masterpiece in the finest ivory silk, charmeuse with intricate hand-embroidered lace appliques and delicate beadwork that caught the light like scattered diamonds, spending countless late nights under focused lamplight, sewing each tiny bead by hand until my fingers ached, but the result was perfection incarnate. Meanwhile, Laura, at 35, was still living rent-free at home, with sporadic part-time retail jobs that never lasted, always between opportunities as our parents phrased it, and they continued their doting unabated, even co-signing yet another loan, this time for $15,000, to bankroll her latest entrepreneurial fantasy, a boutique storefront selling cheap, imported knockoff jewelry and accessories that predictably folded within 6 months due to poor management and lack of effort, leaving her deeper in debt but with mom and dad covering the fallout, as usual. And when Alex and I announced our engagement, they immediately began pressuring me to name Laura as maid of honor, mom calling repeatedly with her voice thick with manipulated emotion saying, "She's your only sister. Family is everything. It would mean the world to her, and to us, if you included her in such an important role," guilting me relentlessly until, against my better instincts and quiet reservations, I relented and agreed just to keep the peace during what should have been a joyful planning period. But tensions simmered beneath the surface from the start, escalating during dress fittings, when Laura complained endlessly about the custom bridesmaid gown I personally designed for her in a soft, blush pink chiffon that draped elegantly with subtle ruching to flatter any figure, the lightweight fabrics swishing beautifully as models twirled in prototypes, yet she'd stand in front of the mirror pulling at it dismissively, whining, "This color washes me out. It's not flattering at all on my body type. Why couldn't you make it in something more vibrant like emerald green?" Forcing me to bite my tongue repeatedly to avoid confrontation, while inwardly seething at her ingratitude. And the wedding day itself finally dawned like the realization of a long-held fantasy, held at a breathtaking, sprawling estate venue, nestled in the picturesque Hudson Valley, with rolling green hills, manicured gardens bursting with seasonal blooms, strings of delicate fairy lights twinkling overhead like captured stars as dusk fell, long banquet tables laden with multi-tiered wedding cakes adorned in flawless buttercream roses and fresh berries, the air heavy and intoxicating with the scent of abundant peonies and roses arranged in crystal vases everywhere, 300 guests arriving in their finest designer attire, mingling gracefully with laughter echoing off the historic stone walls and polished marble floors, and I truly felt like royalty gliding through it all in my custom gown with its voluminous train, whispering softly behind me with every step, the fabric feeling like a cool caress against my skin. But Laura was noticeably off-kilter from the very beginning, sulking during the pre-ceremony bridal party photos, with her professional makeup impeccable, yet her smile plastered on, forced and brittle like a department store mannequin posed in a window display for too long, her attitude casting subtle shadows over what should have been seamless joy. And then during the lively cocktail hour following the emotional ceremony, as guests sipped signature drinks and nibbled on past hors d'oeuvres like miniature crab cakes and prosciutto-wrapped figs, I was circulating happily, greeting old friends and colleagues with my champagne flute in hand when I momentarily set it down on a nearby high-top table to embrace a dear mentor from design school who had flown in specially, turning back just moments later to find Laura hovering suspiciously close, her fingers lingering unnaturally long around the stem of my glass as she fiddled with it, flashing a quick wink and saying lightly, "Just adding a little extra sparkle for you, sisters, to your big day." But in that instant I detected a faint, acrid whiff rising from the liquid, something chemical and off-cutting through the crisp, bubbly notes like bitter almonds hidden beneath, and my stomach dropped as memories flooded back of Laura's past jokes about pranks involving over-the-counter laxatives, slipped into drinks at parties too, embarrass people, or her casual mentions of worse substances for hilarious payback. Realizing with chilling clarity that this was her twisted attempt to sabotage my wedding, likely intending to cause severe digestive distress that would force me to abandon the reception in humiliation, perhaps right in the middle of dances or speeches. Stealing my thunder on the one day meant to celebrate my happiness and new beginning. But instead of confronting her immediately or dumping the drink, I kept my composure, outwardly serene while my mind raced and heart pounded frantically like an overworked sewing machine needle flying at maximum speed, pretending to take a small sip for show before discreetly switching my tainted flute with a nearby empty one when her attention wavered, handing her the poisoned glass later under the guise of sisterly bonding just before toasts began. And the reception progressed beautifully, at first with heartfelt speeches from best friends and Alex's groomsmen that brought tears and laughter in equal measure, glasses clinking harmoniously like wind chimes in a gentle breeze throughout the grand ballroom. But then the moment arrived for the maid of honor toast, and Laura confidently took the stage microphone in hand, looking stunning outwardly in that emerald green gown she'd demanded alterations for at the last minute. The satin hugging her curves with a smug, self-satisfied grin spreading across her perfectly made-up face as she launched into her speech to my dear little sister Emily, who has always had to work so incredibly hard for every single thing she's ever gotten in life, and like some of us who are just naturally blessed, am I right? Pausing for the awkward smattering of polite chuckles from the crowd, who sensed the underlying venom but didn't yet understand it, then continuing with false warmth, "May your marriage be as absolutely perfect as you always pretend your life to be." Raising the glass high, the very one she'd dosed earlier now in her possession, and taking a long, theatrical swig with the bubbles visibly fizzing down her throat as the room watched expectantly. And I stood there beside Alex, calm as a tranquil pond on a windless day, inwardly bracing for the inevitable, observing closely as mere minutes later her expression began to shift, subtly at first, then dramatically, eyes widening in surprise, then alarm, one hand subtly moving to clutch at her midsection as color drained from her cheeks, and suddenly the full effects hit her like an oncoming freight train barreling uncontrollably. Intense cramps, doubling her over slightly with an involuntary, sharp gasp that amplified through the sound system, echoing embarrassingly across the silent room. Mumbling a hasty "excuse me everyone" mid-toast before rushing off toward the restrooms in an undignified hurry, leaving the microphone, feedback squealing briefly and guests exchanging wide-eyed glances. And while that accidental reversal could have sufficed as petty cosmic justice in itself, it wasn't the end, because in her absence the atmosphere thickened with speculative whispers spreading rapidly like wildfire, jumping from table to table under the warm glow of crystal chandeliers where half-empty glasses of rich Merlot caught the light sparkling ominously. And seizing the moment I'd secretly prepared for over months of quiet investigation, I stepped gracefully up to the podium with poise unbroken, my voice projecting steady and clear, without a hint of rage or hysteria. "Thank you so much, Laura, for that truly illuminating and memorable toast, everyone. But while we're on the topic of family and honesty, perhaps this is the perfect time to shed some light on a few long-buried secrets we've all been carrying, shall we?" Instantly hushing the entire room into pin-drop silence, with forks frozen mid-air over plates of exquisitely plated filet mignon, accompanied by garlic rosemary mashed potatoes and seasonal asparagus that were rapidly cooling, untouched, because, for the past year, I'd been methodically piecing together the truth about Grandma's inheritance ever since a chance conversation with her longtime accountant and close friend who later became my trusted ally, a sharp-witted lawyer named Sarah with an eagle eye for financial discrepancies, who offered to review the estate documents pro bono after I confided my lingering suspicions over coffee one afternoon, and her thorough audit uncovered irrefutable proof that the full bequest had indeed been $25,000 exactly as written, but my parents had deliberately siphoned off $20,000 for themselves, funneling it directly into covering Laura's accumulating debts, including $8,000 to settle outstanding vendor bills from her disastrously failed boutique venture, $7,000 to pay down credit cards, bloated from compulsive purchases of luxury handbags that still carried the intoxicating scent of new leather, but sat unused in closets gathering dust, and another $5,000 wired for Laura's solo self-discovery vacation to Bali, complete with luxury resorts and spa treatments where she posted endless filtered photos of sunsets and infinity pools claiming enlightenment, all while forging subtle alterations to probate documents, citing fictitious estate taxes and administrative fees to justify the reduced amount transferred to me. But Sarah had obtained certified originals, including the unaltered last will and testament, complete bank transfer records, and even archived emails between Mom and Dad, where one particularly damning message from Mom read verbatim, "Emily will never notice the difference. She's always too buried in her little drawings and city life to check closely. And Laura really needs this help right now more than ever." And rather than erupting in screams or wild accusations that would have diminished my dignity, I chose composure personified, simply cueing the venue's technical team to project Sarah's meticulously prepared digital slideshow onto the large screens flanking the stage, pages advancing smoothly like chapters in a revealing book with crisp black text and scanned evidence stark against clean white backgrounds for all 300 guests to see clearly, narrating quietly yet firmly. This, as you can all plainly see, is the exact legacy my grandmother intended specifically for me to pursue my dreams in fashion, but instead it was diverted, without my knowledge or consent, to fund someone else's repeated poor choices and lifestyle. And the collective gasps that rippled outward were audible, tangible waves of shock thickening the air, already heavy with forgotten food aromas, as heads turned toward the head table where my parents sat frozen in horror, Mom's elegant pearl necklace that had once been Grandma's, now appearing constricting like a noose around her throat, her face drained of color with hands trembling around her water glass, Dad's usually neat tie suddenly askew as he loosened it unconsciously, staring at the floor unable to meet anyone's eyes, and just then Laura stumbled unsteadily back into the ballroom, pale as a ghost, with sweat beading on her forehead and makeup smudged from her ordeal, arriving precisely in time to overhear the swelling murmurs of disbelief. Did they really steal from their own daughter? Actual theft and forgery. How could parents do that to favor one child so blatantly? Questions floating like smoke through the stunned crowd, and I met her gaze directly across the room with unflinching calm, stating simply, "For everyone to hear, you tried to dose my drink tonight, Laura, in a pathetic bid to humiliate me on my wedding day. But the real and far more lasting poison has been the web of lies, theft, and favoritism you've all force-fed me my entire life while I built everything I have through sheer will alone." And the immediate fallout unfolded with surgical precision that very night, as guests began filing out earlier than planned, with hushed conversations behind manicured hands glittering with diamond rings and watches, many offering me supportive hugs or quiet words of admiration for my grace under pressure while avoiding my family entirely. And in a secluded alcove away from prying eyes, strung with those same fairy lights now casting elongated, dramatic shadows on the walls, I finally confronted my parents privately, pulling them aside with Alex standing supportively nearby, delivering my boundary with a voice smooth yet unyielding like fine silk drawn over sharpened steel. "I am done, completely and permanently done with all of you. No more contact, no more excuses, no more allowing this toxicity to touch my life." Mom immediately sputtering through tears, "But Emily, we're your family. Blood is thicker than anything. You can't just cut us off like this over money." While Dad pleaded weakly it was a mistake. "We only did it because Laura needed the help more urgently. At the time, you've always been the strong one who could manage without it." But I turned away without another word, my gown's train swishing decisively across the floor like the closing of a final chapter. And in the weeks that followed, Sarah's already prepared legal demand letter arrived at their doorstep, requiring repayment of the full $20,000, principal plus compounded interest, bringing the total to $23,500, backed by credible threats of formal fraud charges and civil litigation if ignored, compelling them to comply swiftly by liquidating Dad's cherished vintage Mustang convertible that he'd restored lovingly over years. Its powerful engines roar now, forever silenced in a stranger's garage, alongside dipping deeply into their modest retirement savings that they'd hoped would see them comfortably through old age. And for Laura, the public exposure proved devastating on every level, her remaining social circle evaporating almost overnight as mutual friends distanced themselves, uncomfortable with the scandal, or perhaps seeing their own enabling reflected back. Her once active Instagram account with thousands of followers liking her curated posts plummeting in engagement like a crashing stock ticker until she deleted many photos in embarrassment, eventually forcing her to move out of the family home at last, but into a cramped, dingy one-bedroom apartment in a less desirable part of town with peeling paint and noisy neighbors, taking on double shifts at a corporate coffee chain where the relentless bitter scent of overbrewed espresso and steamed milk permeated her clothes and hair like a constant reminder of fallen status and regret. And the last updates I received indirectly through distant mutual acquaintances, having long since blocked every family member on all platforms and changed my number, indicated she's now buried under an additional $12,000 in fresh, unsecured debt with no parental safety net left to catch her, finally facing consequences accumulated over decades. Whereas for me, that recovered $23,500 served as the perfect foundational seed capital to launch my independent label Empress Designs just 6 months post, a boutique collection specializing in sustainable luxury bridal and evening wear where every piece symbolizes personal transformation and empowerment, rising from overlooked beginnings, like rough sketches evolving into breathtaking runway masterpieces crafted from organic cottons, recycled silks, and ethically sourced materials. My light-filled studio in a converted Brooklyn warehouse, now alive with the fresh, clean scent of new fabric bolts, stacked floor to ceiling in rainbow arrays, the harmonious hum and whir of professional sewing machines blending with creative brainstorming sessions among my growing team. And alongside that, Alex and I purchased our dream cozy brownstone townhouse in a charming tree-lined neighborhood, its sun-drenched rooms filled daily with natural light, the sounds of our shared laughter, and absolutely no lingering shadows from toxic past dynamics, business thriving beyond expectations, starting with intimate pop-up events in trendy venues that sold out instantly, then expanding to a robust e-commerce platform, with online orders flooding in from brides across the country, and even internationally, gross revenue surpassing $150,000 in that inaugural year alone, allowing me to hire talented assistants, establish mentorship programs for aspiring young designers, especially those from disadvantaged backgrounds, mirroring the overlooked girl I once was, and ultimately landing a prestigious full-feature spread on the cover of a major bridal magazine, my serene, confident portrait gracing newsstands nationwide under the bold headline, "From Family Underdog to Self-Made Empire Builder, One Woman's Triumph Over Betrayal." And finally, a profound sense of peace has settled over my life, like a perfectly tailored garment, custom-fitted, without a single uncomfortable pinch or pull, no longer plagued by reoccurring anxiety dreams of tense, forced family gatherings or feelings of inadequacy, but instead embracing quiet inner power, forward momentum, and the freedom to create without apology. Reflecting now that, in hindsight, my wedding day wasn't ruined or diminished in the slightest. It was alchemized and reborn stronger through the fire of confrontation, the failed dosing attempt and disastrous toast serving as the precise detonator needed to shatter old chains and liberate me fully into the life I deserved all along. So I ask you sincerely, what would you do if members of your own family actively tried to poison not just your drink, but your joy, your success, your very sense of self-worth over a lifetime? Would you find the strength to expose the truth and walk away unburdened? Or would you continue swallowing the bitterness in silence? And thank you genuinely for taking the time to listen to my story in its entirety.